6 months had passed since Princess Nadia returned to the Songhai Empire. The storm that had carried her to the shores of Joseon had become nothing more than a story told by sailors. But for Nadia, it was the day her heart had been left behind. Every evening, just before sunset, she climbed the palace cliffs overlooking the endless ocean. In her hand rested the small brass compass Crown Prince Lee Junho had pressed into her palm before they parted. The sea stretched endlessly before her. Somewhere beyond that horizon was the man she loved. At first, she believed he would come within weeks. Then she hoped it would be months. Now, she had stopped making promises to herself. As she looked toward the distant waves, a soft smile crossed her lips. "I wonder if you're looking at this same sea." The wind carried her words away. The ocean answered with silence. Thousands of miles away, inside the royal palace of Joseon, Crown Prince Lee Junho quietly fastened his traveling cloak before dawn. His ship was already waiting. No royal farewell had been arranged. No official announcement had been made. To everyone else, the Crown Prince was leaving to inspect the southern ports of Joseon. Only one person knew the truth. "You're really leaving?" Junho slowly turned around. Standing in the doorway was his elder brother, Crown Prince Hyunwoo. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, Hyunwoo smiled. "So you couldn't stop thinking about her either?" Junho let out a quiet laugh. "I never could." Hyunwoo walked forward and placed a hand on his brother's shoulder. "When she first arrived in Joseon, I admired her more than I should have." Junho remained silent. But somewhere along the way, Hyunwoo smiled warmly. "I realized she never looked at me the way she looked at you." He reached into his robe and handed Junho a sealed travel document bearing the royal seal. "You'll need this." Junho looked at him in surprise. "You knew?" "I've known for days. Why didn't you stop me?" Hyunwoo chuckled softly. "Because some promises are too important to break." He stepped back before adding one final sentence. "When you find her," he smiled, "tell Princess Nadia that Joseon has been waiting for her smile to return just as much as you have." Hours later, as the first rays of sunlight touched the sea, Junho's ship quietly disappeared beyond the horizon. Weeks passed. The ocean carried him through towering waves, heavy rain, and endless skies, until at last, the green coastline of Songhai appeared in the distance. As the royal ship anchored in a quiet harbor before sunrise, Junho gave a simple instruction to every man aboard. No announcements. His captain looked puzzled. "No procession?" Junho smiled. "I've already kept her waiting long enough." That same morning, completely unaware that the man she loved had already arrived, Nadia walked alone through the royal gardens. As she turned onto a quiet stone pathway beneath an ancient baobab tree, a familiar voice gently broke the silence. "You forgot something." Nadia froze. Slowly, she turned around. Standing only a few steps away was Crown Prince Lee Junho. In his outstretched hand, he was holding the little brass compass she had accidentally left on the garden bench moments earlier. For a heartbeat, the world stood still. After 6 long months, the sea had finally brought them back together, but neither of them yet knew that finding each other again would be far easier than deciding where their future truly belonged. For several long moments, neither of them moved. Nadia stared at Junho as though she was afraid he would disappear if she blinked. The morning breeze gently stirred the leaves of the ancient baobab tree, carrying the sweet fragrance of blooming flowers through the royal gardens. Everything else faded into silence. "Junho," she whispered. A warm smile spread across his face. "I told you I'd find you." The tears Nadia had spent 6 months holding back escaped before she could stop them. Without caring who might be watching, she rushed into his arms. Junho caught her effortlessly, holding her close as though he intended never to let go again. "I thought," she began, her voice trembling. "I thought the sea had stolen you from me." Junho gently rested his forehead against hers. "It brought me to you once." He smiled. "So I trusted it would do it again." For a while, neither of them spoke. They simply stood together beneath the baobab tree, grateful that distance had finally surrendered to love. It wasn't long before the palace learned that the mysterious foreign visitor wandering the royal gardens was none other than Crown Prince Lee Junho of Joseon. The news spread quickly through the palace corridors. Servants smiled excitedly. Royal guards exchanged surprised glances. Even the elderly palace attendants who had cared for Nadia since childhood couldn't hide their happiness after seeing the princess smile again. One maid quietly whispered to another, "I haven't seen Her Highness laugh like that since before she sailed across the ocean." Another simply nodded. "It seems Prince Junho brought something back with him." "What?" "Her heart." King Malik received Junho later that morning in the Grand Audience Hall. Unlike their first meeting months earlier in Joseon, this one felt less like an audience between strangers and more like a reunion between respected friends. Junho bowed deeply. "Your Majesty." King Malik stepped forward before Junho could rise. Instead of waiting for palace protocol, he placed a welcoming hand on the young prince's shoulder. "Welcome to Songhai. I have wished to say those words ever since my daughter returned home." Junho smiled respectfully. "Thank you for receiving me." King Malik studied him carefully. The young man standing before him carried himself exactly as Nadia had described. Confident without arrogance, dignified without pride, strong without cruelty. He finally understood why his daughter had entrusted her heart to this prince from across the sea. "You traveled a very long way." Junho nodded. Every mile was worth it. The king couldn't help smiling. "I believe you." Over the following days, Songhai embraced its royal guest. Everywhere Junho went, people welcomed him warmly. Market vendors insisted he taste their finest dishes. Village elders invited him to hear stories passed down through generations. Children ran alongside his horse, waving excitedly whenever he rode through the capital beside Nadia. Instead of remaining inside the palace surrounded by ceremony, Junho preferred meeting ordinary people. He spoke with blacksmiths about their craft. He listened to fishermen describe the changing currents of the great river. He thanked farmers for feeding the kingdom. The people quickly realized something unusual. The crown prince of Joseon never behaved as though anyone was beneath him. Word spread from village to village. Our princess chose wisely. Seeing the admiration growing between Junho and the people of Songhai filled Nadia with quiet joy. One afternoon, she led him beyond the capital, to the village where she had spent many summers as a child. Unlike the grandeur of the palace, the village was peaceful and simple. Children played beneath towering baobab trees. Women sang together while weaving colorful cloth. Old men played carved wooden boards beneath the shade. "This," Nadia said softly, "is where I learned that a ruler should know the names of the people she serves." Junho looked around thoughtfully. "No wonder you became the woman you are." She smiled. "My mother brought me here every year. She believed a future queen should understand ordinary life." Junho gently took her hand. "My father taught me the same lesson." For a moment, they simply stood together. Different kingdoms, different childhoods, the same values. As the sun began to set, Kofi joined them carrying 2 carved wooden cups filled with fresh hibiscus tea. He laughed as he handed one to Junho. "I've spent the last week watching an entire kingdom fall in love with you." Junho smiled. "I was hoping they'd at least like me." Kofi chuckled. "They do much more than that." He glanced toward Nadia. "They trust you." Junho looked surprised. "So soon?" Kofi nodded. "You didn't come here trying to impress anyone. You came because you kept your promise. In Songhai," he raised his cup slightly, "people respect those whose actions speak louder than titles." The 3 of them spent the evening sharing stories beneath the fading light, laughing more than they had in months. For the first time since the storm had changed all of their lives, everything felt wonderfully normal. Several evenings later, King Malik invited Junho to join him for a quiet walk through the palace gardens after dinner. No guards followed them. No ministers interrupted them. Only the sound of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves accompanied their conversation. After a long silence, the king finally spoke. "You have exceeded every expectation I had." Junho bowed his head slightly. "That means a great deal coming from your majesty." King Malik smiled. "My people admire you. My court respects you. My daughter," he paused, looking toward the moonlit gardens, "loves you with all her heart." Junho didn't deny it. "I love her just as deeply. I know." The king stopped walking. His expression remained kind but thoughtful. "There is something I must ask you." Junho gave him his full attention. "If Nadia becomes your wife," the king's voice was calm, "will Songhai lose its future queen?" The question settled heavily between them. Junho opened his mouth to answer, but no words came, because for the first time since stepping onto Songhai's shores, he realized the greatest obstacle between them had never been the ocean. It had always been the two crowns they were destined to wear. King Malik's question lingered in Junho's mind long after their walk through the palace gardens had ended. "If Nadia becomes your wife, will Songhai lose its future queen?" For the first time in his life, the crown prince of Joseon had no answer. The following morning, Nadia found him sitting beneath the same ancient baobab tree where they had reunited. He was quietly turning the little brass compass in his hands. "You've been thinking all night," she said, as she sat beside him. Junho smiled. "Was I that obvious?" "You forget." She gently took the compass from his hand. "I've become very good at reading you." For a moment, neither of them mentioned the king's question. Instead, they simply enjoyed being together. Over the next several days, Nadia decided she wanted Junho to experience the parts of Songhai that few foreign visitors ever saw. Not the royal halls, not the grand ceremonies, but the places that had shaped the woman she had become. She took him to the great libraries, where generations of scholars preserved the history of West Africa. She introduced him to master craftsmen whose families had carved royal sculptures for centuries. She showed him the towering mud architecture that had stood proudly against time. Everywhere they went, the people welcomed Junho warmly. Children ran towards him without fear. Village elders blessed his journey. Women preparing food for the evening meal insisted he sit with them and eat. Junho had visited many kingdoms before. None had embraced him quite like Songhai. As they walked through one bustling marketplace, an elderly storyteller called out to them, "Your Highnesses." They stopped. The old man smiled knowingly. "I've lived long enough to recognize two people who carry peace in each other's hearts." Junho and Nadia exchanged amused glances. Before leaving, the old storyteller added one final sentence. "Never let crowns make you forget you're human first." Neither of them realized how deeply those words would stay with them. That evening, Kofi joined them for dinner beside the palace gardens. The conversation quickly turned into laughter as Junho attempted to learn several Songhai expressions. After mispronouncing one phrase badly enough to make even the palace guards laugh, Nadia wiped tears from her eyes. "I don't think I've ever heard anyone destroy our language quite so confidently." Junho placed a hand dramatically over his heart. "I crossed an ocean. The least your language could do is cooperate." Even Kofi struggled to stop laughing. When the laughter finally settled, he looked at the two of them with quiet satisfaction. "You know, I haven't seen Her Highness this happy since she was a little girl." Nadia smiled shyly. Kofi continued. "When she returned from Joseon, she fulfilled every royal duty expected of her. But," he looked at Junho, "she never truly came home." The words caught both of them by surprise. Kofi smiled gently. "It seems home finally found her." Days passed almost too quickly. Each sunrise felt shorter than the last. Each sunset reminded Junho that time never waited. One afternoon, he and Nadia climbed the palace cliffs, overlooking the endless ocean. The same sea that had first brought them together stretched peacefully before them. Nadia rested her head against his shoulder. "When I was standing here every evening," she smiled softly, "I used to imagine what I'd say if you ever came." Junho looked at her. "What were you going to say?" She laughed quietly. "I had a beautiful speech prepared." What happened to it? She looked into his eyes. I forgot every word the moment I saw you. Junho gently took her hand. You never needed a speech. Their fingers intertwined naturally. As they stood watching the waves, a thought quietly formed in Junho's heart. Perhaps people were wrong to believe that home was a place, because standing beside Nadia, he had never felt more at home anywhere in the world. Then, almost as if fate wished to remind them that happiness never came without responsibility, a royal messenger approached. He bowed respectfully. Your Highness, the Royal Council requests Princess Nadia's presence tomorrow morning. He turned to Junho. And a ship from Joseon has arrived. Junho's smile slowly faded. A sealed letter bearing the royal crest was placed into his hands. Without opening it, he already knew. The peaceful days they had shared in Songhai were about to give way to the question both of them had been trying not to answer. Where did their future truly belong? The letter remained unopened until nightfall. Junho stood alone on the palace balcony, overlooking the sleeping capital of Songhai. Moonlight shimmered across the rooftops, while somewhere in the distance, drums echoed softly through the warm night air. He already knew what awaited him inside the sealed letter. Duty. With a slow breath, he finally broke the royal seal. The message was brief. The Royal Council of Joseon has fixed the date of your formal investiture as Crown Prince. Your presence is required immediately. Preparations for your future reign can no longer be delayed. Junho closed his eyes. The moment he had spent years preparing for had suddenly become the one thing he wished he could postpone. The following morning, Nadia found him sitting beneath the ancient baobab tree. She noticed the opened letter resting beside him. You have to go home. It wasn't a question. Junho nodded. The council has summoned me. Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally, Nadia sat beside him. I always knew this day would come. Junho looked at her. I don't want to leave. She smiled gently. I know. I've only just found you again. And I only just stopped dreaming about you. A quiet laugh escaped both of them before silence returned. Then Nadia reached for his hand. Junho, when we first met, I was the one who had to leave. She squeezed his hand softly. Now it's your turn. That afternoon, King Malik invited Nadia to join him in the royal library. Sunlight poured through the tall windows as father and daughter walked slowly between shelves filled with centuries of history. The king finally stopped beside a large map of the known world. Do you know why I brought you here? Nadia shook her head. Because every ruler eventually stands where you are standing now. He looked at the map. Between what the heart desires and what the crown requires. Nadia lowered her eyes. I wish they weren't different. King Malik smiled sadly. So did I. He turned toward her. But there is something you must never forget. A crown does not belong to the person wearing it. It belongs to the people who placed it there. His words settled gently into her heart. Not as a command, but as wisdom passed from one generation to the next. Later that evening, Junho requested a private audience with King Malik. The king welcomed him warmly. I imagine you've received your summons. Junho nodded. I leave in 3 days. The king remained silent. Junho took a slow breath before speaking again. I owe you an answer. King Malik gave him his full attention. When you asked whether Songhai would lose its future queen, Junho looked directly into his eyes. I couldn't answer because I refused to believe one kingdom had to lose for another to gain. The king listened carefully. I still believe that, Junho continued. But I also know I cannot abandon Joseon. And Nadia cannot abandon Songhai. King Malik smiled thoughtfully. For the first time, you sound less like a prince and more like a king. The 3 days passed far too quickly. On Junho's final evening in Songhai, he and Nadia returned to the palace cliffs one last time. The ocean stretched endlessly before them, just as it had the day she first dreamed of his return. Neither wanted to speak about tomorrow. Instead, they watched the waves in silence. Finally, Junho broke the quiet. When I left Joseon, I believed crossing the ocean would be the hardest thing I'd ever do. He looked at Nadia. I was wrong. She smiled faintly. So was I. She reached into her pocket and removed the little brass compass. She placed it gently into Junho's hand. You should keep it this time. Junho looked surprised. What if I lose my way? Nadia shook her head. You won't. She rested her hand over his. Because now you know where you're going. A gentle breeze carried the scent of the sea around them. Junho closed his fingers around the compass. I'll come back. Nadia smiled through eyes glistening with tears. I know. No matter how long it takes. I know. No matter what stands between us. She nodded once more. I know. For the second time in their lives, they stood on opposite sides of an impossible goodbye. But unlike before, neither questioned the other's love. They questioned only how two people destined to lead different kingdoms could ever share the same future. As dawn broke the following morning, Junho's ship slowly sailed away from the shores of Songhai. Nadia stood on the palace cliffs until the last white sail disappeared beyond the horizon. She did not cry. She simply whispered into the morning breeze. This time, I know you'll come back. Far out at sea, Junho stood at the bow of his ship, his hand wrapped tightly around the old brass compass. The distance between them grew with every passing hour, but so did their determination. For somewhere beyond the ocean, there had to be a future where neither love nor duty had to be sacrificed, and both of them intended to find it. The journey back to Joseon gave Junho plenty of time to think. The ocean was as vast as ever, yet it no longer felt like something that separated him from Nadia. Instead, it connected them. Every evening he stood at the bow of the royal ship, holding the little brass compass she had entrusted to him. Its needle never stopped pointing north, but Junho no longer needed it to find his destination. His heart already knew the way. Upon returning to Joseon, Junho was welcomed with the full dignity reserved for the future king. The palace celebrated his safe return. The ministers resumed preparations for his investiture. Life continued exactly as it had before he left. Yet Junho had changed. His journey to Songhai had shown him that a kingdom's strength was not measured by the land it possessed, but by the friendships it built. Among the first to welcome him home was Crown Prince Hyun-woo. The brothers embraced warmly. So, Hyun-woo smiled. You found her. Junho laughed. I did. And? Junho's smile slowly faded. I also found a question neither of us can answer. Hyun-woo raised an eyebrow. What question? Junho looked toward the palace gardens. How do two heirs rule two kingdoms without asking one people to lose their future? For several moments, Hyun-woo remained silent. Then a thoughtful smile crossed his face. Perhaps you've been asking the wrong people. The following morning, Hyun-woo requested a private audience with King Song. He spoke at length about Junho's journey, about Songhai, and about the people who had welcomed the crown prince not as a foreign ruler, but as family. When he finished, the king quietly asked, "What would you have me do?" Hyun-woo answered without hesitation. For years, we've taught Junho that a king exists to serve his people. He smiled. Now let us prove that kingdoms can serve peace just as faithfully. The king looked thoughtfully through the palace windows. Then he nodded. Send a message to Songhai. Weeks later, the royal families of Songhai and Joseon met on a small island located between their two kingdoms. It was neither Songhai soil nor Joseon soil. For the first time in history, two royal courts gathered as equals. King Malik and King Song spoke for hours. Ministers discussed trade, education, and cultural exchange. Scholars proposed new partnerships between their kingdoms. By sunset, a decision had been reached. Neither kingdom would surrender its heir. Neither kingdom would stand above the other. Instead, Songhai and Joseon would remain independent nations, united by an everlasting alliance through the marriage of Princess Nadia and Crown Prince Lee Junho. The agreement would allow both heirs to fulfill their responsibilities while strengthening the friendship between their peoples. History had never witnessed such an arrangement. Neither had the ocean. Months later, celebrations echoed across both kingdoms. The royal wedding was unlike anything either nation had ever seen. Ships sailed together beneath the banners of Songhai and Joseon. Musicians from both kingdoms performed side by side. Markets overflowed with food, music, and laughter. Kofi stood proudly beside Junho. Hyunwoo stood beside his younger brother, with a smile that carried neither regret nor envy, only pride. As Nadia walked towards Junho, every hardship they had endured seemed to disappear. The storm, the separation, the endless waiting, the impossible choices. Every step had led them here. Junho gently took her hands. I crossed an ocean to keep my promise. Nadia smiled through joyful tears. And I never stopped believing you would. As they exchanged their vows, the cheers of two kingdoms rose into the sky together. For the first time, the sea that had once divided them became a bridge between two worlds. Years later, children in both Songhai and Joseon learned the same story. Not about a war. Not about a conquest, but about a prince who crossed an ocean for love, and a princess who waited with unwavering faith. On a quiet evening, Nadia and Junho returned to the cliffs overlooking the sea, where she had spent 6 months waiting for him. The waves rolled gently against the shore. Junho reached into his robe and removed the old brass compass. Its brass had faded. Its edges had worn smooth with time. He placed it in Nadia's hands. She smiled. It finally fulfilled its purpose. Junho looked out across the endless ocean before turning back to her. It was never guiding me across the sea. He gently closed her fingers around it. It was always guiding me back to you. Hand in hand, they watched the sun disappear beyond the horizon. The same ocean that had once separated two strangers had become the path that united two hearts, two kingdoms, and generations yet to come. And long after they were gone, people would remember them not simply as great rulers, but as the prince and the princess who proved that the strongest kingdoms are not built by conquest. They are built by promises that are kept,